Hi everyone, my name is Jagan. Today I'm going to show you how to configure the vSAN stretched cluster. vSAN we have three types of configurations. One is the standard cluster and two node cluster, and third one is stretched cluster. Standard cluster is the cluster where only one site is we configure. In two node cluster, two node both we only require the two nodes to configure the two node cluster. In the stretched cluster we can have in one site, this is a geographically configured cluster. Therefore on one site uh, we can have a maximum 20 hosts at one site, and other site is 20 hosts on second site. uh, so this about the stretched cluster. And before we configure the stretched cluster, we should make sure that for configurations like a RAID 5 or RAID 6, RAID 5 we require 4 hosts minimum on each site, and for RAID 6 we require 6 hosts s- on on single site. On two sites we require one site 6 host, on second site 6 host minimum for RAID 6 configuration. For RAID 5 require 4 host. And so the hosts that participate in vSAN cluster must have services like vSAN, VM kernel adapter with the vSAN service to be enabled, and vSAN witness traffic should be enabled. I'll show you what are the services that I have configured. See here, enable services. I witness service I have added into management. We can also add like this vSAN witness service, and vSAN traffic and vMotion. vMotion is if we deploy the VMs in a host. If host goes down, the VM will be moved to another host, to neighbor host or different host. So like this, we have to configure all services in each host. Management vSAN witness, vSAN and vMotion services. These four services should be enabled in each host. And the host which is part of the vSAN cluster and RAID 5, if you want to configure the RAID 5 or RAID 6, then the 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 storage should be all flash. All flash disk only supports the RAID 5 RAID 6 configuration. So before that, make sure that our storage devices are all flash. Now we have let's configure the stretched cluster. Uh, If you see, so all hosts must have this service to be enabled. Now let's configure the vSAN cluster. Uh, so in vSAN cluster, we have two methods to configure. One is quick start and one is the manual. In quick start, we can configure the vSAN. It's a three steps only. One is creating the cluster, adding the host, and configuring the cluster. In second step, we should keep all the host in maintenance mode, and then configure the cluster. But I am choosing the another other way, like coming to vSAN and services. I'm configuring the vSAN manually. Yes, see, we have a single vSAN cluster and two node vSAN cluster and vSAN stretched cluster. Now I'm configuring the vSAN stretched cluster. So here, if you see here, to in event of site or host failure, the vSAN stretched cluster will be helpful. This kind of configuration. Click on configure. Now it shows the here vSAN ESA. vSAN ESA is Express Storage Architecture. This kind of architecture is supports by NMV backed storage devices. Currently in our environment, we don't have such storage devices NMV. We have SSD backed storage devices. Therefore, this kind of that currently I'm configuring the architecture is based on open storage architecture. Therefore, I disabled here option. I disable here option. Now vSAN HCL DB up to date. HCL is hardware compatibility list. If you so all the hosts that to be part of the vSAN should be hardware compatibility list. Then only we can we don't will not face any hardware compatibility issues. So we can go and we can go to we have a where if you click on the Ask VMware, it redirects us to the official page where we will verify whether hardwares are compatible or not for configuring the vSAN. Therefore, we will verify that. And here, if you see here, physical NIC speed requirements. Here, the NIC that connected to the NICs that are connected to the host should have a speed minimum 10 gig for open storage architecture. For express storage architecture, we should have a 25 GB speed. 25 gig speed we should have. For express for open storage architecture, we minimum 10 GB is if 10 GB is fine. So and this is a compatibility checks, hardware compatibility and then NIC speed. Click next. And here the services. Yeah, we have a space efficiency service, compression and deduplication and compression. Compression is compress the data, VM data in the form of bits. Therefore, we can save the space. Deduplication is removing the unnecessary or copy of the data. We have two copies of the data. So if we have two copies of the data, deduplication feature removes all unnecessary copy of the data. And encryption in the encryption we have a data at rest encryption, data in transit encryption. Data at rest encryption will encrypt the data at rest, and in transit it will encrypt the data when the data is being forwarded, being sent or being traveled. Disk format option. So as of now, I'm not configuring any services. I just keep it as they are by default. We can configure it later. Click next. And here the climb disk, climbing the disk. So we have total capacity. Capacity is 4.06 TB and cache is 480 GB. One thing is when you configure the vSAN, make sure that 10% of the capacity disk is allocated for cache, because 10% that's recommended configuration. So 10% of the capacity disk should be given to the cache device. And here when it comes to see the best feature of the vSAN is it automatically takes the capacity and cache. For example, if size of the disk is more more than cache, then it automatically considered as a capacity. If it is less, then it considered as cache. So you don't have to do manually. However, if you want to check, you can check it. But this is grouped by the size. So here it is totally grouped by the size. If you want to group by the host, see here all the disks are capacity disks are configured and first capacity all capacity disk, and cache disk are configured second. So disk here, this is a capacity disk on each host. This is a cache disk on 8 hosts. Actually, generally I have two cache disk and two capacity disk. If you want to see by host, grouping by host, see each host I have two cache tier and two capacity tier. One cache tier, one capacity tier, one cache tier, one capacity tier. The cache tier is 30 GB, capacity 260 GB. Likewise, I have 4 disks in each host. So 2 disks for capacity tier, 2 disks for cache tier. I have 4 disks in each host. Like we see, I have 4 disks in each host. So you can configure, you can see grouping the host or grouping the size. You will see. So each host have 4 disks and 2 disks for cache tier and 2 disks for capacity tier. Likewise, the total capacity of the vSAN is 4.5 TB, 4 TB for cache capacity and 480 around 500 MB, 500 GB, sorry, 500 GB is for cache. So click on the next button, and here if you see the preferred domain and secondary domain, the preferred domain, this is you could see configuring the fault domain. Fault domain is nothing, just if each host is a fault domain, if one host or one site goes down, we'll have a next host backup or next site backup. If entire site goes down, we still have a VM remain accessible from the second site or second host. There are events or cases where host goes down. So in spite of the host goes down, the data is accessible. In spite of the site goes down, data is still accessible just because of the fault domain that we have. Uh, just because of the fault domain, we have the feature in vSAN. Okay, let's configure the fault domain. Okay, 26. 26 host, I want to move to secondary domain 27 and 28 and 29. I could give the name of Bangalore as my preferred domain. Sorry, Bangalore. Okay, so, that is the main objective of fault domain. Fault domain is nothing, just if one host goes down, we have a backup of the second host. If I mean to say, the data is copied on two hosts. So if one host goes down, we'll have a backup. Still, VM is accessible from the second host. If one site entire site goes down, we still have a second site. Like VM still accessible from the second site. That's what the objective of the fault domain. Now I've created the preferred first site is Bangalore, second is Mumbai. I'm clicking on next and select the witness host. The witness host I'm selecting now. What is the witnessed host? Witnessed host is, as name suggests, it it is tiebreaker. It is a tiebreaker. If it decides which host is active, which host is not active. If both, which host is healthy or which host is unhealthy. For example, someone is trying to access the VM. So somebody is trying to access the VM file. So VM files are generally VM files are spread across all hosts. So VM so when someone is trying to access, it should the witness host is the one who decides which VM is which host is healthy, which host can be accessed. So witness host is the one it judges. It is you can call it as a tiebreaker. So that is what the witness node is, and witness node should have some certain requirements to be met. It has some requirements to be met, like it also it should not be part of the vSAN cluster, and witness host can be at a different location, and it should also have a VM kernel adapter with vSAN service should be enabled. So, and this is our major requirements. Like, no, it should not be part of the vSAN cluster, and and vSAN kernel adapter should be enabled. vSAN service VM kernel adapter with vSAN service should be enabled in node host, in a witness node. So here, see, compatible checks succeeded. Here, green mark, it's showing compatible checks succeeded. Click next, and here we are also claiming the disk for witness host. This witnessed host, this why we require cache and capacity is to store the components, storing the witness components. See, witness host doesn't store data components. Data components stored in vSAN data store. That is being contributed by the each ESXi host. So only witness host store the witness components, not the data components. Now we are configuring the cache tier for witness host and the capacity for capacity. Click next, and okay. If you see review all information, vSAN stretched cluster, click finish. It takes time. Just hold on. Okay. So we have configured the vSAN. We have configured the vSAN cluster. It is still being created. We have to wait for some time. See, if you see the recent task, it is still being created. Data storage is being created. We have to wait for some time. So this is how we can create the vSAN stretched cluster. So thank you for watching. Have a nice day.